The good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit have been doing 2 episodes a week for quite some time now, and it's all thanks to, first of all, Jason, and second of all, our patrons who allow us to add the space on our server, broadcast more, store more, share more with you, the listeners. I'm envious of those of you who have unlimited storage and media server capabilities. We pay for ours here at the C4 FAP. It ain't cheap. We thank you so much for those of you who go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit and contribute at any level to say thanks, to say, I want to be a part of your Slack channel conversations. I want to get exclusives. I want to get early access. I want to get ad-free access. I want to get swag. I want to get some free stuff. Whatever your reasoning is, we appreciate it at any level because it does make a difference. So from the bottom of Kyle and I and Jason's heart, thank you for contributing.
Aloha! This is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing a friend of the podcast, writer Kelly Thompson. Kelly is here to promote her new series, Black Cloak. This is from Image Comics. Issue 1 comes out on January 11th. Issue 2 comes out on January 15th. And we will also briefly talk about a couple of her other Marvel titles, such as It's Jeff and Captain Marvel. Kelly, welcome back to Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jason. It's good to be back.
No, and Kelly, thank you very much for coming back on the show. Really, thank you very much.
Of course.
Now, before we begin the interview, I want to give a big shout out to Andrew Fitzgerald of Image Comics, and of course my co-host Drew for forwarding me an advanced copy of Black Cloak. And then I did get some information from before for this interview from John Suntress's Word Balloon. That episode was dated December 12th of 2022. Now, listeners, if you guys get a chance, please check out that great interview. You know, Kelly, that was a great interview that you did with John. I'm being serious. Yeah. So, all right. So, Kelly, for listeners, where can they follow you on social media?
I'm still on Twitter, although I don't know how long that's going to last. I'm on Twitter at 79 semifinalist. I'm also on Hive. I don't know if that's going to go or not, but I'm there as Kelly Thompson. You can pretty much always find me anywhere as some version of 1979 semifinalist or Kelly Thompson. But primarily these days I am on Substack, which is not really social media, but it's a newsletter. It's the best place to keep in touch with me, and that's 1979semifinalist.substack.com.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. And then also, listeners too, me and Kelly will talk a little bit more about her Substack a little bit later in this interview. I'm just going to jump right in. So we're going to start talking about Black Cloak. I'm going to read the opening of issue number 1 because I really love it. And this is how, and so please bear with me, listeners. So the location is 001.01. The city is Kiros, and it's dawn, the morning time. The last city in the known world. Hundreds of years ago, there was a world-ending war, but victory was snatched from the jaws of defeat. The great evil was vanquished. The kingdom was united in peace. It's not going great. Turns out getting along better when there is a great evil to be vanquished with a common enemy. Without a common enemy, it's a fucking mess. And assholes are all too plentiful, as are murderers. Now, listeners, again, that was basically the opening page of Black Cloak. And I love it because it's kind of like a little bit of a dragnet opening that sets the stage for the story. And Kelly, I'm going to say, to be honest, it speaks the truth on a micro home level and on a macro world level, especially if there's a common threat, we all band together. And then after the threat is gone, maybe a week later, we all become ourselves again. I just love it. It's just great,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so many epic stories that we read, they're all about coming together to defeat the great evil. And I think we love those stories, and we love them
Hmm.
because they're powerful and moving, and they're intense, and they've got these great moments for, you know, incredible darkness and incredible lightness and hope. But we rarely see those worlds after our heroes succeed, and
Yep.
I like the what's next. I like what comes after happily ever after. And so this idea that all these creatures came together to defeat something great and evil, and they
Hmm.
actually managed to win. But now, a lot has been destroyed. There's basically this one huge city, walled city left, and they're all sort of living together in it, trying to survive. And
Hmm.
it's not going great because these are creatures that don't want to live next door to each other and don't necessarily like each other when they're not going to war. It's a common
Hmm.
enemy, right?
Hmm.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. And once you take away that enemy, it's really hard to
Yes.
figure out how to live together. And so it's a really great way to talk, not directly but indirectly, about sort of class and race and
Yes.
systemic problems. I mean, a lot of the issue in Black Cloak for the citizens of Black Cloak is that while we meet our lead detectives, which are called Black Cloaks, murder
Uh-huh.
detectives, homicide detectives are called Black Cloaks in this world, our two leads are Essex and Pax. And I think it's very clear from the jump that these are good people trying to do good work.
Yes.
But this is not a society that trusts cops, and less so the
Yeah.
way we feel about cops, because it seems to be there's really disgusting systemic problems and racism and really deep seated issues buried in a lot of our own policing in our world. That's less true in this world,
Hmm.
but more that it's just a new idea for
Hmm.
these creatures. They don't understand law and order yet. They're still getting used to it, and they don't really trust it.
Hmm.
This is a place where if someone steals your crops, you want to do a blood vengeance spell or something,
Hmm.
not take them to court or see them have to pay you back or whatever. So it's a society that's still trying to figure that out, and thus it's very untrusting of this new thing, even though our heroes are trying to do good things. But it's also happening at a time when the first murder that occurs that sort of sets off the story is a really famous prince who would
Yes.
maybe have eventually been a king of
Hmm.
Kiros. And uh, it's taking all the issues that have sort of been bubbling under the surface that they've just been trying to survive with, and it's basically set it to maybe it's going to explode now. Like, if we who would kill this sort of beloved prince, like what's really going on here? It's just
Hmm.
like a lot of things are really on the edge in this city, and it doesn't take much to sort of tip it over into chaos, but they're right there.
Yes. And I mean, um, it's I, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of stumbling on words because I just love this first issue. Um, because a couple of things is that it's an awesome blend of fantasy, science fiction, and police procedural shows.
Mhm.
I love it. It and you blend it in so well, and it's so natural.
Thank you. Thank you. I
You
mean, I
know.
think Meredith is obviously, a huge part of that. When people ask why we would mix these things, my answer is usually, well, they're all my favorite things. So why not put them all together and like see what putting them together, sometimes that creates problems, but sometimes problems are a great motivator to further story solutions. So it creates a lot of interesting things. But I think it's Meredith who really, is the magic of bringing it all together and making it look and feel like one cohesive world. In the hands of a lesser artist, I think, it would be easy to see the cracks
Hmm.
of trying to combine those things that don't always go together. But Meredith is an incredible artist. She's an incredible world builder. She's a genius with color. And so,
Yes.
she really knows how to dig into this and make it to smooth out all the seams that you might otherwise have. And I think, one of the things that excites me about her doing this, her style is not for everybody. It's a little more abstracted, it's spare. It's very clean and sharp, and part of what I like, but it still has a rounded softness to it sometimes, like especially in her character designs. But it does feel atypical for what you might think you'd find in a traditional, I don't know about Western fantasy, but a fantasy, right? It's got some manga influence. I think there's like a lot of sort of South Korean influences in there too. She and I talked a lot about Arcane, that we were both loving that TV show, which is based off the League of Legends video game, which I haven't even played, but the Arcane TV show, if nobody's watched it, it's an animated on Netflix. It's incredible. It's incredible. If you like Black Cloak, I highly recommend it, because I think of all the things I've watched, that's the thing that sort of comes the closest. And that's, I believe, an incredible French studio. So I don't know where they're taking their influences from, but like, so drawing all these sort of influences in and making that world feel not just Western in its, in its influences and its approach. So yeah, we had a really good time, and she does incredible character designs for, we really tried to expand out our sort of fantasy creature stuff. You always end up with so many human creatures who just look slightly weird, and we really wanted to push on that a little bit. So while our two leads are still, mostly quote unquote human looking, we really tried to expand your options and get creative with the way this world works, And
I'm going to say the other, let me talk about a little bit about the creature designs too, because I love it where that I know, like the when what is it? I can't remember. It's like I think it was Essex who's talking to that, like the bunch of juveniles hanging around.
The little troublemakers, teenage troublemakers, or preteen troublemakers, maybe.
The smoke-faced juvenile delinquent. I love it because you can tell, because Meredith, you can recognize, these are the thing I loved about her artwork is, even you recognize, they're recognizable. They're juvenile delinquents. But I love it when I forget in one of the panels, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was one where one of the kids turned to the Smokeface, and Smokeface's head disappears into his jacket or something. And that's pretty cool. You know?
It's very cool stuff. I can't remember. I think that the smoke monster, the smoke creatures, we call them shifters. That's the class. And that's because they can shift their look. Like they can look like the smoke monster, like that juvenile does, but especially as they get older, they can shift their shape. So like this isn't in the story, but in the world building, and I hope we would do more and get to do this. Like shifters tend to be like assassins and things like that, because they can shape change and things like that. They're hard to track and stuff like that. So, a shape changing plus a little bit of magic, can make like a really incredible illusion. So I hope we get into some more of those crazy things. There's so much fun world building to do. But yeah, the shifters, and those preteen kids are a great example of how great Meredith is with the character design, because when she designed those kids, and specifically Romu is the shifter kid, and Iona is the little fairy girl, or the young fairy. They were so cute. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to write them into more. And so I ended up expanding their roles. And when she turned it, she basically, first time pass on a character design, Meredith basically nails it. Sometimes you want her to go back like a little something. So when she did that, the kid who has like the gas mask thing on in that scene, Jessup or something, which is such a cool design. He's sort of the douchebaggy leader of the group. And when she sent back the first design on him, it was a little underwhelming. And I was like, it's probably fine because he's just a minor, super minor character. I
Yeah.
was like, but it's a little weird that he looks the least cool of the group when he's sort of the leader. And she's
Uh-huh.
like, how about this? And she sent it back with that crazy puffy jacket and the gas mask. And I was like, oh
Yes.
my God. I was like, is it my favorite character now? Like, do I have to make this a better character because this
Uh-huh.
design is so good? So that happens a lot with Meredith because she just gets you excited about things. You haven't encountered him yet. I put him on the you got a reference to him in issue 1 when
Yes.
Essex is on the phone talking to Sashenka. I think she calls him Sash, but like
Okay.
that's a character that Meredith has designed and just incredible. Really, really gorgeous and like based loosely on some mythology stuff and like existing creatures,
Okay.
but then
Hmm.
made her own. It's really great. It's really great.
And then the other thing I love about Meredith's artwork is, even though it's this is like in a fantasy science fiction world, it's a recognizable world. I can still recognize it, that it's our world. Like when Essex, I think, like, I want to say it's the third page where Essex walks into the coffee shop, and
Hmm.
it's clearly, you can recognize it's a coffee shop. It's not like, like, it's not like a Hobbit cave and they sell coffee.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
when they go to the police station, this is a police station.
yeah,
It has that feel, even though the character, there's all these different creatures, fairies, elves,
yeah,
um, goat creatures. You
yeah,
recognize it, and
yeah,
it's a nice feeling to it. It's a comfortable feeling. Yeah.
yeah. There's I don't think we kept the police station pretty basic, in
Hmm.
part because we knew we were going to populate it with some different tech and a ton of characters. But I will tell you, you get to see the morgue in issue 2 and pay a lot of attention to the little background details because it's some of Meredith's finest, most subtle
Hmm.
work in there. Like she just did these really cool things that I wish I had thought of and written into the page, but she did them all on her own and they're really fun, but very subtle little background things, but just the kind of stuff that makes something sing, that makes you really feel that the creators care and they're paying attention.
Yes. Okay. So I know we talked a lot about Meredith, but I want to shift my focus to you. Like, how did you come up with this awesome story? And I've already mentioned that blends fantasy, science fiction, and police procedure, into this series. Because, like I said, it works. It feels natural and it flows natural. Like,
I mean, I love procedurals and detective stuff, so I'm always sort of thinking about detective and PI type stories,
Mhm,
anyway. And
mhm,
the origin of this one was really just, well, what if I do a police procedural but in like a fantasy world? What does
mhm.
that look like? Um, and there's nothing, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Like
Yeah.
plenty of people have done that where like, you put a Western, but you do it on an alien planet and like,
Yeah.
just mixing genres a little bit. So
Mhm,
I don't think we're reinventing anything here. I do think the sci-fi aspect, making it not just pure fantasy, but trying to tinge it with more science fiction than you would typically see. I think maybe that's a little bit unique, but again, we're not the only ones doing it. There's plenty of
mhm,
examples of it existing out in the world. I think this idea was an evolution. I think when I first came up with this idea, it was a lot more about, it had a different name and it was a lot more about the police
mhm.
aspect in this world.
Yes.
But that really changed over the last 5 to 10 years, as my feeling and I think the general perception of police institutions in this country has
Mhm,
really changed. um I'm never going to not love a great detective story, especially because in our detective stories, our detective is rarely the bad part of the system.
mhm.
The guy that we're relating to is usually the guy who's trying to do the right thing no matter what, or who's caught up in a system that's rough. So you know, I don't think that's going to change. I think we're always going to love our detectives and our hard-boiled PIs. They're typically good guys trying to do the right thing in bad situations. But I do think it's obvious that our relationship to the police has changed. And so of course this story changed too. You know, I don't think the Black Cloaks and the Kiros Police Department aren't corrupt the way it feels like our police are now. It's not a systemic thing, but it's just unfamiliar, right? And that's scary. The unknown is scary for all of us, I think.
We talk about the different races, and you've already talked about you know, the races that you've created. You know, did you and Meredith, did you know, do you like have a like some type of Bible? Because it sounds like you might have a Bible for your different races.
Yeah, I do have a Bible, but it's a little outdated because it's both unfinished and outdated, because what happened was, you know, I've been working on this off and on for years as an idea, and like at one point it was getting very detailed. Like I was doing like family trees of characters and things like that. Like, but the more I got into it, even though it was fun, and even though I figured that some people would really love that kind of thing, to be honest, it feels a little overwhelming to me to get into that stuff like that. I prefer a story is a little more pure and requires a little less, like, you know, hard work and flipping back and forth to remember whose kid is, you know, whatever. So I wanted to streamline it down a lot. One of the benefits of that is that I think while a lot of good ideas come from me, it also left me much more open to good ideas that come from Meredith or the world, right? So, for example, Dracona are a class, a species in this world, and the implication is they're somehow descended from dragons. We don't explain it, but that's sort of between the name, and they have these sort of leathery wings thing and stuff like that. That's the idea in the world, is that somehow they claim they've got a tie to dragon blood or whatever. And there's mention about dragon blood being very powerful. There's this weapon called the Dracona dagger, which we see. So, you know, there are all these sort of hints about the breadth of this world, right? And like, so a Dracona was a character, was a class I came up with in the very early stages. But the shifter thing, you know, we were talking about that before. I don't remember when that came up, but I think that might have been Meredith's idea. I think there's a photographer in the opening scene, and she made that guy like a smoke monster. And I'm like, well, if we're going to do that, let's make a character. And that's how we decided to make Ramu a shifter. But then there's like, you know, there in an early scene, there's like flaming skeleton that we called
at the bar.
At the bar that we called death shards. And that's like, we just stole that from Meredith's Instagram page. She just had this amazing drawing of a skeleton on fire drinking a drink. And I was like, should this be in Black Cloak? Like, it feels right. And she's like, I love it. I was like, can we call them death shards? And she was like, yes. So, you know, there's a lot of that fun stuff. And I feel like if I had like really done the Bible and been completely closed off to it, like, would those of ideas have like been able to grow the way I wanted them to? So, you know, the Bible and an outline are very good ideas that I stand by, but I also think you have to be like not too married to what you're designing, especially if you're doing it on your own. Like once you bring in collaborators, I feel like that's when things really start to blossom and become sort of magical, instead of just this cool thing you've been, you know, sweating over by yourself in the dark.
The other thing I want to ask you about too, or actually mention to you that, you know, and I want to mention to the listeners that this first issue is 51 pages, and you know, it wasn't, like I said, the dialogue felt natural. Everything flowed very smoothly, and I'm going to say that this first issue, it's very dense, and in a good sense, where there's a lot of layers on this. And like you already said, there, it kind of covers like a little bit of systematic issues, there's race issues. There's also a little bit about, deep secrets that are slowly bubbling up, because like you said in the beginning, there's a prince that's murdered, but I'm not going to say, I don't want to spoil, where he was found or anything. And also too, there's also family issues as well. Like Essex, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, because if I remember correctly, when she entered into the gated kingdom, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, which the castle area,
Or the
yeah.
castle. Yeah, she's, because she's called Exile. They
Yeah.
never reference her to, her name. I just thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting. And um, was this part of your outline, or did it, like the family issues, the class issues, was this planned over the years, or did it slowly come out like naturally while you're writing the story?
Yeah, I think, I have a really incredible family, so I'm not sure why I'm so drawn to found family stories of misfits finding each other.
Hmm.
I always feel like a lot of people who are so into that idea, and listen, it's a big one. I mean, the X-Men are found family,
Hmm.
so it's not exactly it's not exactly an uncommon idea, but I've always felt like a lot of people who are really drawn to that idea probably maybe don't have a great family history themselves or whatever,
Yes.
and so it becomes so important. But I love it even though I have a great family, and I think it's just because it's really powerful. It's really powerful to find people of like mind or like ability or like thoughts or kindness or whatever. It makes you feel less alone in the world, and it's a really powerful motivator. And I think that especially because we wanted to deal with class issues, it
Hmm.
was good to have a character that had experienced both worlds,
Yes.
and that while perhaps she was forcibly ejected from one and not loving that, it
Hmm.
was still like a choice she made. And if you ask her, I think she would say she prefers being a Black Cloak. Like, she doesn't want to be in exile because
Hmm.
of all the horrible things that come with that, but I think she feels she fits in this life she's in now as opposed to the one she was in before. And we unfold that slowly. There's about one flashback per issue, I think, and so we unfold
Yes.
some of the mysteries of that as we go forward through the series. And it's going to have it all ties together pretty tightly into how it sort of explodes at the end.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's she's a character with a real conflict within her. She's from two worlds, really.
And I'm going to say that's a perfect segue into this question. We talked about a little bit before we did the interview, and now, in issue one, in the later part of the story where Essex is in the gated castle area, um, she's hurt, she's being treated inside the castle, um, and the medical person who's treating her wants to take her black cloak off, you know,
Yeah, assess
just
her injuries.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But Essex refuses to take off her black cloak. And is
Mhm.
there a symbolic meaning to this? Like, is this really part of her identity? And
Yeah, I think yes. I think she probably would have been hesitant to remove the cloak under any circumstances, especially when she's at the castle, because it may be a technicality, but it literally is protecting her a little bit to be there
mhm,
because it protects someone who wears it,
yes.
both figuratively and literally. Um, but but her reaction is very extreme. When people read it, they'll see it's very intense, and so there's more to it than just that. And I believe issue 2 we
Mhm.
already start chipping away at that. So yeah.
Kelly, off the cuff question, because when you mentioned that there's at least a flashback in every issue. In issue number one, there's a flashback scene at the castle, and if I correct me if I'm wrong, there's like a cat-like creature that she is a pet.
Yeah, so Taka. And
Okay.
you actually see it you see a version of it in that opening scene.
Yes.
Remember, not the mermaids, but in the coffee shop.
Yes.
And you're the second person to sort of pick up on this, but that's a bigger deal than people know.
Okay.
And there's a very good reason you put the things you put in the first pages of a comic book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't introduce a weird thing like the taka that seems like it has nothing to do with anything unless it's going to have something to do with everything. So that's a pretty big hint for people who are reading along.
My off the cuff question, is you know, did you put that cat-like creature to honor your cat?
A little bit. I think I'm a very big fan. I've sort of talked about this a lot lately, but I'm a very big fan of non-human creatures, whether they be robots or pets or sort of upgraded pets like familiars or something. Obviously Jeff the Land Shark is a big success for me at Captain or at Marvel. And so yeah, I mean, part of it is just wanting to write what I like to write, which is an animal familiar is super fun. Part of it is wanting to recapture a magic of a character like Jeff that really captures people's hearts and imaginations. You know, I was recently watching Andor, which I think is one of the best television shows I've seen in a very long time. And honestly, tough competition this year. I watched some of the best shows I've seen in a very long time this year. But Andor, even though I was super connected to all the characters, and I won't spoil anything, I was toward the end of the series when the tension was so high and so many characters were in vulnerable positions, and I cared about them all. This isn't a failure of the writers. It's just the incredible success of the robot character. I was beside myself worrying about that robot. Not only that he might die, but that he might be left alone, which seemed worse. And I was incredibly upset about it. So yeah, I'm always sort of searching for, you know, can I build that connection myself with a familiar character? My book Story Killer has my novel Story Killer has a character. It's a Shiki, I'm sorry, and it's called Jeff, and it's bonded with a character named Micah. And people laugh all the time. Well, oh, are you sorry you named it Jeff? And I'm like, no, I named it and Jeff for the same reason. I think it's a really funny name for a pet. I love it. It seems very serious and hilarious. I love it. But Jeff in Story Killer, he transforms. He spends a lot of time as a cat, but he can be all sorts of things. It's basically based on its will and its sort of quote unquote owner's will. But the way we structured it in Story Killer is that it's the first time that the Shiki is sort of in agreement with its owner as opposed to being controlled by its owner. And so we're sort of exploring that agency of that familiar and everything. So I'm very interested in these kind of ideas. And you never know when it's going to like hit and you've got a Jeff on your hands or when it's just going to be like a little fun thing in a book. So the good news is for the takas, they have a big role in the book that I hope is going to land beautifully and really make a lot of sense for people and that we've built it the right way. So even if they don't become everybody's favorite pet ever, it's still going to be really great from a storytelling point of view, I think. So
another off the cuff question, and if you're okay, what is your cat's name?
I have two cats.
Okay.
They are the Monarch and Clive. And you probably shouldn't name a cat after a supervillain. It's a bad idea, but no, he's great. He's great. He's arguably he's the more vocal of the two. So often on podcasts, people will hear him crying in the background. Clive isn't as vocal, but Clive is much more a pain in the ass. So
oh darn, I forgot. And you're gonna have to forgive me, Kelly, because I forgot to look this up. Like, for Black Cloak, just for the first story arc, how many issues is in the first story arc?
The first arc is 6 issues.
Oh, okay.
and we're working on 5 now.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would say every issue is in addition to the first issue being almost triple size. I think it's 51 pages, something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, all of them are oversized. So I think
Nice.
some of them are like 22 pages or
Mm-hmm.
23. I think one of them is 25. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll be getting a lot of bang for your buck. The first issue is priced $1 up because it's so large, but all the
Mm-hmm.
others will be the regular $3.99 price, even though there's extra content.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say, Kelly, it's that first issue, even though it's correct me if I think like 4.99. I mean,
Yeah,
listeners,
it's $4.99. Yeah, it's $1 up. Yeah.
if you guys get this is it, when I read the advanced copy, it's great. It's like I said, it was like I said, it's a, and I mean this in a very good way, Kelly. It's a very meaty issue. It has a lot of layers. The story flows very well. The dialogue is very natural, and it's characters that I can relate to, and it's a world that I can relate to. And like I said, and I'm gonna say this. It's like after I've read that first advanced copy, I emailed, Kelly to say, hey, are you willing to come back on the show? Because I loved it that much. I really, it was great, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's very sweet. I'm really glad that you respond to it. I mean, you do all this superhero stuff and you're not sure if people are going to vibe with,
Hmm.
the thing that's not so superhero-y.
Hmm.
And it's really rewarding and wonderful to see you responding to it so well. And I'm glad it feels like a really meaty first issue.
Hmm.
I think because I don't write with a lot of exposition and there are no captions in this except for
Yes.
locator captions, we sort of felt like it was more important than ever to really have a large number of pages in that
Hmm.
first one, just to help people really feel like they got it. They got into the world, they got into the characters, and we gave them enough intriguing stuff that they want to come back. I feel like because the writing is a little spare compared to what people usually tend to expect, I think in an all new world type book,
Hmm.
I think extra pages really helped us there, so that
Yes.
we didn't overload the pages you got, but we did give you a lot of them, so you made sure you felt like you're invested. So yeah, I hope that's how people feel, that like they really got their money's worth and they're intrigued, and want to see more of that world.
I just want to make one more comment before I start moving on to my other questions. Um, because the murder scene, when I saw Pax, and I guess the other police officers, when they're investigating the murder scene, the thing I loved about it was the thing that the other hook that hooked me in right away was it was like, oh my god, it feels like I'm watching Law and Order. It just felt comfortable. It just felt great. It felt, again, it felt natural.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. I just loved it. Yeah. So um
Thank you.
no, you're welcome. Okay, so now we've already talked about now MEREDITH McCLAREN, your artist. Is
Hmm.
that, did I pronounce her name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask, how did you team up with her? And I know you said that she did amazing work on the colors as well too. So if you don't mind, how did you team up with her? And yeah.
So Meredith and I did my first published work in comics together, a book called Heart in a Box, that came out from Dark Horse. And I found her / we became friends through Sophie Campbell, who I had started to be friends with just sort of online. I was a big fan of her work, and I was, we were just started talking through her blogging or something. And she and I became really good friends. And I was wanting to do this Heart in a Box thing, and I was sort of asking Sophie's advice. I mean, I would have loved Sophie to have drawn it, but
Mhm.
she's very busy, and she was certainly way above my pay grade in the sense that I hadn't published anything.
Mhm.
But she was very awesome in like recommending some people that she was big fans of that she thought might be cool. And one
Mhm.
of them was Meredith. And the second I saw Meredith's stuff, I knew that would look amazing if she was interested, and she was, and we put together a pitch. I paid her some small amounts of money for that pitch, and Dark Horse eventually picked it up, and we were sort of off to the races. But I was completely a nobody. Nobody knew my name, and Meredith was still struggling as an indie. She'd done some really cool stuff like Hopeless Savages with Jen, my God, I'm losing my mind. Greg Rucka's wife, Jen Van Meter, that's her name.
Okay.
Jen Van Meter, and she'd done a lot more cool stuff, and some people knew her name. But it's still a big risk on a new book, and so it didn't do super great. But honestly, I'm really proud of it. Like, even now, when I look back, even though it's the first thing I did, I think it's a terrific book. And so, I knew that Meredith would be amazing to work with again, and we had done a gem short, not a short, a story arc, I think 5 issues together on my gem run, and I loved working with her on that as well. So she seemed like the perfect partner for something like this when I found out about the Substack deal and knew that I would have the money to fund it. She was my first call.
And then and I'm sorry, I forgot to put and then you got Becca Carey. I'm sorry, I forgot to. But is she like the letterer? I forgot to write down what her role is in Black Cloak.
Becca Carey did lettering. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, some of those PDFs that went out were missing the Indicia page for some reason. I'm sorry about that.
No, don't apologize.
Print edition will definitely have them.
And then how did you team up with Becca?
So I think I had never worked with Becca before, so I went to a couple people that I had worked with before, but it was a super quick startup. So I was having trouble finding people, but I got a couple great recommendations, and all 2 or 3 people that I talked to that were too busy, all of them recommended Becca. And she had also worked with Jordi Belair on a really great book of theirs together. So yeah, she was just great, and I brought her in, and I had hoped initially that we would also be able to do some fun like world building stuff, like data pages and stuff, but it ended up we just didn't have the money in the budget, so we didn't get to do that. But she does that kind of stuff too, which is very cool. So I knew that she could not only totally handle the lettering, which was going to be pretty challenging because we knew we had a lot of crazy characters, and we're mixing 3 genres, so it's a lot to ask. And whenever you're building a world from the ground up, like really thinking about what that font is going to look like, how those word balloons, like there's a lot of really fun choices in the early days when you and your letterer are working on that. It was very fun. That's not something I traditionally have gotten to do because Marvel Comics, they just have their style, right? So you're not involved in that. But it was fun. It was fun, and Becca's been terrific. So yeah, I was very lucky.
And then before I start going to the other questions, I forgot. Do you want to give a shout out to anyone else? Like, was there an editor on Black Cloak?
Sure. Charles Beecham is our editor on Black Cloak. He was also my editor years ago on my Hawkeye series at Marvel, which got nominated for an Eisner. So he's very talented, great guy. And also Ryan Hughes is the book designer. So he takes the gorgeous cover illustrations we have. We have so many covers for that first one, and he reformats them into the book design. So but that's our team. It's pretty small, just the 5 of us. Yeah, keep it tight.
Yeah, that's really good. And then now I'm going to start talking about your Substack, because if I remember correctly, because when I interviewed you last year, when you started your I think it was a couple months after you started your Substack that the story of Black Cloak appeared on your Substack originally. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've been releasing it on the Substack. By the time this goes out, people on the Substack will have read through chapter 4. So Yeah, so they're getting the advanced look at it. Some people who pledged at like a higher level who get physical rewards, they'll be getting copies this week. I hope my copies are arriving tomorrow. They've been delayed because of all the shipping, but shipping issues and weather problems in the US, I think. But yeah, it's been really exciting. I mean, I don't think anything about the Substack has gone like exactly as you expect, but also a lot of us didn't know what to expect. It was a whole new ground, but the experience has been pretty great. I mean, if nothing, even if you don't like reading it digitally, or you don't think a newsletter is for you, which I would say with social media being as unstable as it is, a newsletter is a pretty good way to keep track of people that you're interested in keeping track of. But you know, even if you're not into that, at the end of the day, Substack funded this book. So if you love it, thanks Substack.
Now, also on Substack, you have another series. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on if I mispronounce the title. It's called the Cull. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Cull. Yeah.
Because I remember seeing, I think, at least a couple preview pages. Oh my God, one of them was incredible. It looked like a scene out of from the movie The Mist, where they see the huge giant creatures walking the. It was lovely.
This is my other book, which will be forthcoming from Image in 2023 as well. We're not on the schedule yet, so I would say summer is probably the earliest it'll start coming out, but this is a 5-issue first volume. It will set up to be more, but there's going to have to be a break between the first 5 and whatever else we do next, because Mattia has some other commitments in his schedule. But this is Mattia Delius drawing and coloring. It's absolutely stunning. It's completely different than Black Cloak, which I sort of love, doing 2 completely different books that are still completely my thing. Like, I'm so into them. Maddie has got a super realistic style, so I mean, it just looks like a movie. It's incredible. And this is sort of the rough pitch for this, is that it's sort of more like a grown-up Goonies plus, you know, I don't know, otherworldly. I don't want to say Stranger Things, not because I don't think it's that or do think it's that. I just didn't really watch Stranger Things after season 1, so I don't really know what it is, but there is like an otherworldly element here. These kids go on an adventure to film a short film. I shouldn't say kids, they're like 18. They've just graduated high school. They're close friends who are basically going to go their separate ways. So they go off on one sort of last adventure, and things go very sideways for them. And it's definitely a horror book. It's an adventure, but it's also a horror. It's been really fun doing it. We're working on issue 3 now. It's looking incredibly gorgeous. I've been holding back the preview stuff just because, you know, Mattia's style, a lot of times when you put up preview stuff, you know, you can sort of fake it because it's out of context. So like, even though you're showing a really spoilery panel, it's like, well, they don't know the context of this panel, and so it works. But I feel like Mattia's style is so highly detailed, it's a little harder to get away with that, because like it's very clear what's happening all the time, you know. But expect to see a lot more of that on the Substack this year as we build up to the launch. Again, I hope it'll be summer for the print issues. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Now I'm just going to start moving. I'm going to slowly start wrapping things up. I'm going to start moving to your Marvel titles. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your first one I want to talk about, it's called It's Jeff. Now I know the first appearance, and now it's this little baby land shark that walks around. I know his first appearance was in your West Coast Avengers run, and now it's an Infinity comic on the Marvel Unlimited. Now the series started back in 2021, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it still kind of is going on the Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah, Yeah,
Okay.
we just did season 2. Season 1 was last September 2021 through
Mhm.
like the end of the year, and then this season was started in September, and it's 12 episodes again. So I think there's one more issue still to come out, one more
Yes.
episode still to come out,
Mhm.
and that is on Marvel Unlimited. But for those of you who've been wanting a print edition, that is finally coming in March. I
Mhm.
think it's March 29th.
Okay.
And everyone should buy it. It would be hilariously amazing if it's Jeff beat out like Batman and Spider-Man that month. Wouldn't that be amazing? Let's do
That'd be
that.
nice. That would be really nice.
I haven't seen the proof yet, so I'm not exactly sure what it looks like. I hope they'll be sending that shortly. But it said 48 pages in the solicit, so I
Mhm.
suspect it's both seasons
Oh, okay.
together, but
Yeah.
I'm not positive.
Mhm.
So anyway, it's got a really great Gurihiru cover, which is the regular artist for the Marvel
Mhm.
Unlimited series. And then it's also got an incredible Diwali cover. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. I apologize if that's wrong. It's been going around the internet. It's like sort of a Jaws riff, and it's really hilarious. So I'm loving it. I believe there's another cover I haven't seen that's Ron Lim, I think. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so keep an eye out for those. March 29th, I believe, last week of March.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only now. Please forgive me, Kelly, because as we all know, there's a lot of comics out there. I've read at least the first Infinity comic, and I love it. It's very cute. It's a very all ages series. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, because it's really cute.
Yeah, no, it is all ages. It's definitely family friendly, and it's mostly silent. It's the only words in it. There's some sound effects, of
Mm-hmm.
course, and then Jeff a lot of times says a version of mr, which is like MRR. So he'll sometimes say versions of that, and then just people yelling his name. That's it. Those are the only words. And the premise is sort of he's an absolutely adorable little friend, but you know, he's also a fucking shark. So you know, he eats everything, and he's a little dangerous, but yeah, it's great. It's great for kids, it's great for friends. I mean, it's great for adults. I try my best, even without words, to make every story clever enough that it can feel a little bit like The Simpsons, where you know The Simpsons feels like it's for kids, but it also
Yeah.
very much is doing something else. So
Yes.
we try to do that a little bit as much as we can. It's
Yeah.
been fun. Gurihiro are absolute geniuses. They're storytelling masters. They can draw anything.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I'll turn in one of those it's Jeff scripts, and I'm like, nah, it's not my favorite one. It's okay, but it's not my
Mhm.
favorite.
Yeah.
And then we'll get the layouts back from them, and I'm like, I'm wrong. It's my favorite one. Like, they're just so cute. They're so good at it.
Now I'm gonna ask before I start moving on to your Captain Marvel title. Now, does Monarch and your other cat's name is Clive, correct?
Yes, one of them. Yeah.
Okay. So as Monarch and Clive, do they give you some inspiration for some of the Jeff stories?
Yeah, for sure,
Okay.
for sure. I
Oh,
mean, Jeff is definitely I mean, people always want to say shark dog, and I'm like, if anything, he's a shark cat because I write him, I created him, and I'm looking at cats. So to me, his personality is much more cat, but there's some dog in there, there's some shark in there, there's you know mischievous Jeff.
yeah.
But yeah, the cats are an endless stream of inspiration for sure.
Okay. Now I'm just gonna move on to your Captain Marvel title. You know, I know it's getting close to the 50th issue. I know yesterday, January 3rd, issue 45 came out. Now, for me and for the listeners, may I ask, can you just like let us know what's the current storyline you're working on right now?
We're doing such a fun story right now. It's a Captain Marvel Brood storyline, which I've
Hmm.
been, you know, for people that know Captain Marvel, like the Brood is one of her biggest nemesis. It's they sort of tortured her into becoming the woman that she is today in some ways.
Hmm.
Basically, they unlocked her sort of binary powers. She became incredibly powerful after the manipulations of the Brood, but
Mhm.
while she probably appreciates those effects, nobody wants to be tortured. So it's been a big nemesis for her. I've been wanting to get them back in the mix since we started the book, quite honestly, but the Brood have been in a weird place in the Marvel universe because they've been under the control of a character called Brew, who's a little sort of intelligent hybrid Brood, and he ate something called the king egg, which means he controls all the Brood, and he's a good guy. He's the next man. So the
Oh,
Brood
okay.
haven't really been enemies for a long time, for
Mhm.
a while, at least since I've been doing my run. But things have been changing a little bit, and also we've been able to, it was with the Krakoa era of X-Men, like it's a little trickier to get them as guest stars in books and stuff.
Mhm.
And I really felt like, to do a Brood arc, I would want to bring the X-Men in.
Mhm.
That's historically from the old Chris Claremont
Yes.
stories, like how Carol encountered the Brood, and she's pretty tight with the X-Men. It's really important relationships for me, and I love the X-Men characters. So yeah,
Mhm.
I was really excited when I wanted to do this big Brood arc, and I finally got the green light, and then I got the green light for a bunch of my favorite X-Men characters. So we're having a great time. The Sergio Davila is drawing most of the story, most of the arc. It's 43 through 49 is the Brood
Okay.
arc, and he's
Mhm.
drawing all but issue 46. But the good news is Javier Pina came on for issue
Mhm.
46, and it looks just as gorgeous. So it's really fun.
All right. Couple more questions. Um, what is the most fun and exciting thing you love working in comics?
I think it's just the collaborations. I
Mhm.
mean, it never gets old to
Mhm.
open your email box and have pages of things that you wrote
Mhm.
now realized into art and
Mhm.
making a story. It's magical, and it honestly, it doesn't get old. I sort of thought it was one of those things. I mean, I would say the only part of it that gets old is if you're on a book and your team isn't right, if there's something
Mhm.
wrong,
Mhm.
that can be a little heartbreaking because you know what it should look like or what it should
Mhm.
be, and you're not quite there. And I
Mhm.
don't even mean that to as a criticism to any artist. First of all, I've been incredibly lucky, and so that's very rarely happened to me. But it's not a criticism. Even when it happens, it's not typically, I would say, a criticism of a specific artist or a
Mhm.
colorist or anything. It's a criticism of it's just not the right fit,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the best artist and the best writer in the world
Yes.
aren't maybe the right fit for each other. They're just interested in different things. I mean, that happened to me with an artist that I am a huge fan of. We were talking years ago about doing a creator owned, and
Mhm.
we had an idea that we thought was going to be interesting. We were working on it together, and just the more we talked, the more clear it became that we were just totally interested in different things. And
Mhm.
I was super interested in narrative and this sort of procedural thing and these characters. And they wanted to do something much more sort of psychedelic and
Mhm.
sort of otherworldly and experimental, maybe.
Mhm.
And we ended up just sort of going our separate ways, like in a nice way. We were fine about
Yeah.
it. I think we just sort of looked at it and we went, wow, well, we'd still like to work together someday, but like
Yeah.
we're just not the right fit right now. And
Yes.
I feel like that was totally the right decision. Like I have a little bit of regret in my heart about,
Mhm.
oh, well, maybe that was a missed opportunity. Maybe we could have figured it out. But I think we were actually just being like super practical and reasonable. And
Yes.
like nobody wanted to waste their time. And
Mhm. Yeah.
I think I'm proud of us for like taking that time at the beginning of a project and like really thinking about whether it was the right thing. So,
Mhm.
you know,
And I just want to make a comment because for Black Cloak, you and Meredith, and I'm sorry, I forgot to put this in my notes that you guys, this team for Black Cloak worked very well because it's a passion project, because you can really see, it's a passion project, and it's a labor of love, and I'm not putting down your other works, or but it's just it this one um
hits different.
yes, and it's very good. Yeah, because
Thank you.
I love It's Jeff, and I'm sorry, Kelly. Again, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to read your Captain Marvel run yet, but I will.
That's okay. That's okay.
But
it's a lot of comics out there. We
yes,
can't read it all. We can't read it all.
But like I said, again, Black Cloak just really sucked me in, literally in the first page, and then in like and then like the second, like either the third or fourth page, it just pulls me literally into the world.
No, well, I'm so glad. I mean, listen, I want people to love all my work, but if I have to choose, I would rather you love my creator-owned work more than my work for hire work, for the very reason you're talking about. I'm incapable of not like putting my whole self into every project I do, whether it's a work for hire thing or it doesn't matter. I am very bad at I'm very bad at just doing something a little bit and being like, okay, that's fine. Like, because I think sometimes that's probably smart. Like, not everything should require the same amount of attention, And I do think there's a difference between writing Black Cloak and Captain Marvel.
Yes.
There's difference in the limitations that are put on you, which can be a blessing and a curse. There's all sorts of factors here. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, you want that passion to come through. You want people to see that you truly love what you're doing. So I'm glad if that's coming across. That's great.
Yeah. Last question. Do you have any closing words to our listeners?
Please buy Black Cloak.
Yeah, that's fine.
Buy Black Cloak, and more importantly, buy issue 2 as well, so that we don't have a brutal attrition on that.
Yes, okay.
And buy the Cole when it comes out too, and maybe subscribe to my newsletter so that we don't lose track of each other if Twitter implodes.
Yes,
which sort of seems like it's happening.
Okay. All right. Kelly, I wish you all the success with Black Cloak and also your Marvel titles. It's Jeff and Captain Marvel. Mahalo for your time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me another opportunity to interview. Thank you very much. And I also, again, I want to thank Andrew of Image Comics for an advanced copy of Black Cloak #1. Now, if you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader, please check out Kelly's Black Cloak series from Image Comics. Issue 1 comes out on January 11th, and issue 2 comes out on February 15th. Again, like I said, I love this first issue. I cannot wait for the second issue. Again, this first issue is very meaty. I mean, it's 51 pages, and I love it because in a sense, it's very satisfying. There's a lot of layers to this story with great characters. To me, the dialogue flows naturally, and it's set in an incredible fantasy world, that's beautifully drawn, and it's also very recognizable, and it is. I want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.